Shabbat Shalom. As my son nears his first birthday later this summer, that's the whole sermon, I'm done now. I've been reading some parenting books, and one of the questions that everyone seems to have different answers to is, how do you respond to the persistent, "that's not fair"? Do you reason with the child, attempting to explain why the situation is, in fact, fair? Do you acknowledge that sometimes life isn't fair? Do you point out times when life's unfairness ended up in their favor? Though we think about "that's not fair" as a quintessential toddler phrase, complaints about fairness aren't limited to young children. In fact, when we read the Torah, there are many narratives that cause us adults to wonder the same. Whether we're reading about Miriam's being stricken with leprosy, or the innocent Egyptian people experiencing the plagues, or the fact that Moses never gets to enter the promised land, the Torah is full of harsh punishments. So I'd like us to dive into that last one, since we read this week about Moses' sin, the sin that renders him ineligible in God's eyes to lead the people into the promised land, even though he has been their leader since their Egypt days. So Ross is passing out some source sheets, and for those joining us by live stream, you can access this sheet at pasyn.org/sermon teaching. So I'm going to read the first source on the page, and if you don't have it yet, you'll just listen to me. This comes from this week's text, from this week's Parsha. Is that fair? That's not fair. I know. It's so unfair. So as I read this text, I want you to ask yourself, and we're going to discuss this afterwards, what was Moses' sin? See if you can identify it. What did he do that was so bad? And I'll encourage you not to read ahead beyond the first source. So we'll get your original ideas and answers to this question. What was so bad that Moses did? So God spoke to Moses saying, "You and your brother Aaron take the rod and assemble the community, and before their very eyes order the rock to yield its water. Thus you shall produce water for them from the rock and provide drink for the congregation and their beasts." Moses took the rock from before God as he had been commanded. Moses and Aaron assembled the congregation in front of the rock, and he said to them, "Listen, you rebels, shall we get water for you out of this rock?" And Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod. Out came copious water, and the community and their beasts drank. But God said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not trust me enough to affirm my sanctity in the sight of the Israelite people, therefore you shall not lead this congregation into the land that I have given them." Okay, what do you think? What was Moses' sin? You can raise your hand, and I'll repeat back what you say to help people hear. Actually, Cantor Davis has a microphone, so maybe we'll use that. That sounds great. I saw your hand first. What was Moses' sin?
He didn't follow instructions.
Okay, he did not follow God's explicit instructions. He was supposed to speak to the rock, and he struck the rock. Great. Okay, we have a couple answers over here.
Moses did not respect God by hitting the rock that hard.
Okay, so it wasn't just, he didn't respect God, partially maybe because he didn't follow the instructions, but he also hit the rock very hard. Okay, all right. And twice.
He said, "Shall we get water from the rock?" as though they were doing it.
Okay, he took credit for something that really wasn't his to take credit for. Right, and maybe it was just unthinking. Great. Anyone else? What was Moses' sin? Anything else you can identify here that was so bad? Yeah, I hear another one over here. Oh, was that a hand? No, okay. Boris, yeah.
Moshe had precedent from the previous time when he was told, when he hit the rock and the rock gave water. So he might have forgotten and he had made a mistake.
Okay, made a mistake. Good. And Martha, I think, had one as well.
And
Anger management.
Anger management. Yeah, he kind of lost his temper. He refers to the people as you rebels. That's not such a nice way to speak to people. Great. Okay. So what you just said, Martha, about losing his temper, that's what Maimonides thinks. So let's look at the second source on the page. I'll read out loud again, but now I think everyone has the sheet, so there are no complaints about fairness this time. His whole sin lay in erring on the side of anger and deviating from the mean of patience when he used the expression, "Listen, you rebels." The Holy Blessed One censured him for this, that a man of his stature should give vent to anger in front of the whole community of Israel, where anger was not called for. This behavior in such a man constituted a profanation of God's name, since he was the model of good conduct for all the people who aspired to find their worldly and otherworldly happiness in emulating him. Whatever he did or said would be subject to scrutiny. When they saw him thus in anger, they must certainly have concluded that he was not displaying personal animus or pique, but on the contrary, had not God been angry with them at their demand for water, Moses would not have been provoked. Yet we do not find that God was angry or showed disapproval when he told Moses to take the staff and assemble the people. So not only is a lost temper an undignified way to behave for a leader such as Moses, but there's an additional problem that Maimonides identifies. Because the people held Moses in such high regard, they would have believed that it wasn't Moses who was angry with them. It couldn't have possibly been. It must have been God. So perhaps Moses' real sin was not just the temper lost, but the incorrect message that he delivered to the people, making them believe that God was angry with them. I find Maimonides' reasoning compelling, but my initial question remains, knowing that Moses' punishment for this sin is that he never gets to enter the promised land, is this really fair? Does the punishment fit the crime? And if we're looking at Maimonides' reason here, I'm not so sure. So we're going to look at Nahmanides. This is the third source on the page. Nahmanides, also born in Spain like Maimonides, but about 60 years later. So let's look at Nahmanides. Moses made the fatal mistake of saying, "Shall we bring you forth water?" instead of saying, "Shall God bring you forth water?" Right? Someone identified that. As in all the other miracles where the authorship of God is always explicitly stressed, like in Exodus 16:8, when God gave you meat in the evening to eat. The people might have been misled into thinking that Moses and Aaron had extracted the water for them by their own skill. Thus they failed to sanctify me in the midst of the children of Israel. They violated the express command of God to speak to the rock before their eyes in order to sanctify God publicly thereby. They rebelled in the sense of deviating from the command of God in not taking every step that was necessary to publicize the power of God. So this is a totally different understanding of the sin. It's not about Moses' anger. It's not about the people believing God was angry. It's not about Moses not following God's instructions to talk to the rock. Nahmanides believes that Moses' real sin was that he took credit for something that God did. And in doing that, he missed the opportunity to publicize the power of God, to bless God's name in front of the whole community. The final text on the page is a more modern one from Nechama Leibovitz, an Israeli biblical scholar of the 1900s. And she is referring here to Nahmanides' comment that we just read. This explanation, Nahmanides, gains in plausibility when we recall that the children of Israel had, but a short while previously, left a land of enchantments and sorcery, and were very likely to attribute the production of water to Moses and Aaron's magical skill. Thus, the two great leaders of Israel were liable to defeat the purpose of the whole Torah by their sin of omission. Their whole life was directed at propagating the idea of the omnipotence and providence of God, and here was another golden opportunity of driving the lesson home. What was Moses' life purpose? His journey starts in Egypt, and he leads the Israelite people during this time of immense transition as they go from slavery to freedom, from living among Egyptians to becoming their own nation, from wanderers toward a destination. As Nechama Leibovitz writes, his whole life's purpose was to bring God into the people's lives, to turn them into a God-loving and God-fearing nation. And in this one moment, by saying, even accidentally, that he was the one bringing forth water from the rock, he undermined the whole thing. It was Moses' job to take every single opportunity to highlight God's power in front of the people. And at the rock, he failed. That is reason enough to not be the leader that ends this journey. If this was Moses' sin, his punishment is not unfair at all. It strikes me that though none of us are Moses, it is also our job to take every single opportunity to highlight the blessings of the Jewish people. How often do we see a news article or social media post or a flyer on a street corner that contains anti-Semitic tropes or calls for violence against the Jewish people? The instances of Jew hatred, I don't have to tell you, are pervasive and growing. And there's another conversation to be had about how we stop anti-Semitism, all the strategies that are likely to work. But one of them is right here in this parsha. Take every opportunity to sanctify God's name. Translated for 2025, take every opportunity to highlight something beautiful about Jewish tradition, to express pride in a scientific advancement by a Jewish scientist, to acknowledge the good that Israel does for the world, to teach a special Jewish ritual, to post on Instagram about the challah you just baked, or the trip to Israel you just went on, or the thought-provoking Jewish book you just read. These are opportunities. They are opportunities for Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name, and thereby sanctifying the Jewish people. And they're opportunities both in front of our fellow Jews and in front of non-Jews. We have an incredibly special religion, people, culture, tradition. I think we all wish more people knew that. When we miss opportunities to highlight it, like Moses in this week's Parsha, we risk losing the end of our journey, like Moses did. But when we do take every opportunity to share our pride and joy in who we are, maybe, unlike Moses, we will make it to the metaphorical promised land. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you for joining the Park Avenue Synagogue family. I hope you enjoyed the sermon. Please consider supporting our online community by scanning the QR code or by going to supportpas.org or by making a donation. Shalom and see you in Shul.